So for our first presenter, we have Bhashwati Bhattacharjee, who will be presenting on writing to racists, analyzing Miranda's bad in a tribal member as a narrative against colonial biopolitics. So I welcome the first presenter to make the presentation. Yes, please.
Thank you, ma'am. So, shall I begin?
You have 10 minutes to present, 10 minutes to make the presentation.
Okay. Okay, sure. So, first of all, thank you, organizers, for selecting this paper for presenting at this virtual conference today. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Bhashwati Bhattacharjee here from the Department of English of Dr. Hari Singh Gaur Central University, Madhya Pradesh. And the title of my paper is Writing to Resist, Analyzing Deborah Miranda's Bad Indians, a Tribal Memoir as a Counter-Narrative Against the Colonial Biopolitics. I'm trying to share my screen. I would like to ask everyone if the screen is visible. Yeah. So I would like to ask everyone again whether my screen is visible. Is it visible?
Yes,
Yeah.
the screen.
Okay. Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah. So the paper aims to critically analyze this memo from a biopolitical perspective while taking into consideration how such forms of life writing can be read as counter narratives against the dominant master narratives. So Bad Indians, a tribal memoir published in 2013, is a mixed genre book by Deborah Miranda, who is a descendant of what are known as Mission Indians or indigenous peoples of many southern Californian tribes who were forcibly removed from their land by European settlers. The book is part tribal history of the Californian Mission Indians and part family memoir that includes oral history, newspaper clippings, anthropological recordings, poems, and personal reflections. And the memoir is written to narrate the stories of Miranda's excellent family along with the experiences of California's indigenous people from the time of Spanish missions into the present. Now, let us first briefly discuss the theory of biopolitics according to the opinions of these two famous theorists, Michel Foucault and Giorgio Agamben. So, Michel Foucault, in his 1976 book, Society Must Be Defended, said that sovereign power used to concern itself with the right to decide life and death. However, he argues that the old power of death that symbolized sovereign power was now carefully supplanted by the administration of bodies and the calculated management of life. Now, this is exactly the situation where, in the Foucauldian sense of the term biopolitics, explicit political calculations intervene in human life and its mechanisms and make knowledge power an agent of transformation of human life. So, in a biopolitical system of power, the biological survival of one population is always in difference and opposition to the survival of the other population. And in such a society, oppression is meted out by a race that holds power and is entitled to define the norm, and on the race who deviates from that norm. Now, moving towards Giorgio Agamben's idea of biopolitics, let us first briefly discuss two of his very famous terms, bare life and homo sacer. Agamben theorizes bare life as human life devoid of political protection. In more lucid terms, it can be defined as the condition when an individual does not anymore enjoy any kind of legal protection, and the action of killing that person is not considered as a punishable offense. Agamben relates this concept of bare life with that of homo sacer, or sacred person, which according to the ancient Roman laws used to refer to a person who cannot be sacrificed for religious purposes but can be killed otherwise, and the act would not be considered a homicide. So, according to Agamben, biopolitics is the extreme politicization of human life which turns certain populations into homosexual, thus making their extermination politically justifiable. Now, if we just shift our attention to the historical context of the text of our discussion today, we come to know the facts like these, that the Esslin tribe was a small group of indigenous people who inhabited the Santa Lucia Mountains region in California for more than 6,000 years. Now, during the third Spanish missions in during the three Spanish missions in California, beginning as early as in the 17th century, Esalen people, along with other native tribes, were subjected to forceful conversion to Christianity, forced labor, torture, and subsequent starvation and diseases, which caused partial or complete extinction of some of these tribes. Now, while some of these people indeed survived the catastrophe, the European settlers intentionally removed their authentic identities from the dominant narratives and institutionalized the concept of beneficial and essential colonization. So, Deborah Miranda's Bad Indians challenges this settler colonial biopolitics by demonstrating how the indigenous people were viewed as politically unwanted populations and how the marginalized body of these people itself was constructed as a site for projecting the dominant power's anxieties of the other as threatening, exotic, repulsive, or otherwise essentially different. Here, through these few excerpts from the text, we can see how it criticizes the process by which the settler colonial narratives were institutionally authorized and internalized. They also show how the concept of the baseness of the people of color has long been normalized, how voices or stories coming from the vantage points of the natives have long been suppressed and replaced by the colonial master narratives, and how, when voices from the margins are actually heard, the dominant master narratives are radically subverted. Here, in the last excerpt, it refers to an incident where Miranda encountered a girl in fourth grade preparing a video as part of her mission projects. This rendering of Spanish colonization as made up of hardworking Indians and benevolent Franciscans through such a mission mythology is, as Miranda reveals, a consistent part of primary school education in California, perpetuating lies about a past form of colonialism by turning it into a mission fantasy fairy tale. The revelation that Miranda was a descendant of the actual mission Indians was a shock for the little girl who had been taught that these people were already extinct. The memoir here becomes a successful counter-narrative when, in Miranda's terms, these indigenous skeletons, who were thought to be dead long ago, confronts the colonial narratives and starts talking back. So, to conclude, we can say that Deborah Miranda's Bad Indians challenges this settler colonial biopolitics. I'm sorry. Yes, okay. So, in order to conclude, we can say like this. According to Choctaw author Lay and Ho, tribalography refers to a rhetorical style that native people use as an eloquent act of unification. Deborah Miranda, through her memoir, combats the overarching imperialistic and racist ideologies by writing a tribalography that challenges the official story. So, in this way, the memoir demonstrates the power of stories and storytelling as vehicles for indigenous peoples' histories and their resistance against the biopolitical master narratives of the foreign settlers. Thank you.
Thank you, Basudhi, for your presentation. There's so much noise here. I will save your questions. I hope I'm audible. The campus is informed that it's getting out so loud. So I'm not able to make it inform them to stop the. Okay. Am I clear now? Yes, that's right.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Actually, we'll move on to the next question. I will say my question, but then we'll have it because we've asked these people to stop the. So
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry for the interruption, but then we will continue with the paper presentation and we'll save the questions to us. So I ask the next presenter to come forward to make the presentation, please. Our next presenter will be T. from Salem. So make the presentation.
Ma'am, please on the mic.
Miss Baswati is around here. Okay, Miss Abhishek has begun her presentation.
Yes, ma'am, I have my presentation. Just a minute. I'll join you just a minute.
Oh, make it fast. Wait. Yes, Miss Abhishek, you can begin.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
You have 12 minutes. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. The topic that I have taken for today's presentation is food as an expression of identity and culture in Elif Shafak's novel, The Bastard of Istanbul. Food and culture, both of them, they play a very, very important role even in our day-to-day life. And you find that food and culture, both of them are interrelated to one another. You can't separate food and you cannot separate culture. So even in our day-to-day life, food plays a very, very important role. Food uh, basically was seen as a human need, and then food was also started to look in very different aspects as well. So food is also very, very important even in to study today's culture. And you find that food also gives identity to people. Not only does food give identity to people, but it also gives, each and every country has a special dish or a special food And thereby you find that food actually gives identity to a country as well. So if you look at this particular novel, The Bastard of Istanbul, we come across that the novelist Elif Shafak, she has used lots of food imagery in this novel. We come across almost all the chapters in this novel are actually named after some food items or based on some food, at least some nuts and spices. So this itself reveals that how food is very, very important, not only for a culture, but food is also very, very important, even for a country as well. So almost all the food items that we come across in the novels are also related, or they are also associated with the characters. For example, in the first novel, the title of the first chapter begins with cinnamon. So this cinnamon is actually associated with the character Zeliha. Then we have the second chapter, which is titled as Garbanzo beans, which is again associated with the central character of the novel, Rose. Sugar, like that, is also associated with the Armenian family. Roasted hazelnut is again associated with one of the aunts of and the elder sister of Zeliha. And pine nuts is also associated with the daughter of Rose, who's none other than Armonosh. So food can also be looked in terms of religious point of view. For example, in Quran, you find that what is Muhammad Prophet advises? He advises that we also should share food with strangers as well. Throughout this novel, how does Elif Shafak actually depict Turkey is she imagines there's one chapter which talks about which is titled as pomegranate seeds. And when you read this particular novel, we come across that she compares Turkey to that of a pomegranate. And Turkey as a country is a country which has people from different culture, which has people from different countries. And the seeds that we come across in the pomegranates are none other than the people who come from different country and from different culture. The important dish that we come across in the novel, which again talks about the central food of Turkey, is none other than Asia. So you find that this particular dish also has religious value, and it also, we find that when is this particular dish actually cooked, or whenever an important family member visits the house, only at this point we find that that particular dish, Ashya, is actually cooked. And in what way is this food actually important is we come across the religious significance when in Bible we have the story of Noah. And when Noah and his entire family member, when they came out of the ark, you find that they realized that there was shortage of food, and therefore Noah orders them to bring whatever people come across, whether be it animals, birds, insects. So whatever people came across, they collected all that and they cooked that ingredients. And as a result of which, we have the food ajwa, which is ajwa is a food, is actually a dessert which is actually prepared on nuts, not on meats. So the other characters that we come across in the novel, one such character is Rose. She's basically from America, and you find that her first marriage ends in a failure. She gets married to an Armenian family, and after she gets her divorce, she decides not to cook any Armenian food. And from that day onwards, she actually sees to it that she keeps Armenian food outside her kitchen border. And she also has a daughter. Her daughter's name is Armanosh. And she decides that after her divorce, she decides that from that day onwards, she will cook only Kentucky dish, and especially hamburgers, maple syrup filled with pancake. And so through all these, Rose actually is actually building a sense of identity for herself also. So when she got married, in her first marriage, she just knew to cook only one thing, which her Armenian in-laws, they always criticize her, and they also called Rose Kitchen as a land of variety. And whenever Rose in-laws visit her, she always cooks only one thing, and that is the barbecue today. And uh, we also find that food and supermarkets, both of them are also interrelated. When Rose visits one of the supermarket, we find that supermarket in a way also reflects the culture. It also talks about when we go to supermarkets, we come across lots of junk food. We also come across lots of dietary food. So all these also talks about how food and people's view of diet and body size, body image also matters a lot. So you find that today people have become very, very conscious of what they eat. And you find that even people's body size, body types are actually categorized based on their fruits. For example, pear shaped body, apple shaped body. So all these things again talks about how food culture and society, how a society looks at a woman based on uh, the body shape, based on the body size. All those, again, food plays a very, very important role. The next important character in the novel is Zeliha. So Zeliha represents the Turkish culture. When the novel opens, you find that she purchases cinnamon sticks, but she forgets, she leaves them behind. And you find that in all of the Turkish cuisine and desserts, especially, you find that cinnamon is used in abundance. The reason why cinnamon is used in abundance is for its aroma. But later on, when the first chapter ends, you find that Zeliha's sister, they cook rice pudding, but it lacks the cinnamon aroma. So Zaliha also identifies, she gives identity to each one of her sister based on their cooking style. She carves for eating only one thing. When she goes to abortion, as she's lying on the abortion table, she prefers to eat only one thing, stuffed green peppers. But she doesn't abort her child. When she comes home, she finds that the entire dinner table or the dining table is filled with stuffed green pepper. And you find that whenever she comes across stuffed green pepper which is not filled with nuts, she knows very well that it is her elder sister Banu who has prepared. When she comes across a green pepper filled with lots of seasoning and herbs, she knows that this has been prepared by her elder sister. And if she comes across a dish which is very, very sweet, she knows very well that this dish was actually prepared by her third sister. So in the same way, you find that Zeliha was actually raped by her own brother. And as a result of which, she gives birth to a daughter. Her daughter is Asya. And for each and every birthday, you find that Asya is actually given a 3-layer caramelized apple cake, which she doesn't like at all. And when she reaches 19 years, she has the guts and she speaks her likes and her dislikes. And she tells them that she would prefer not to have any birthday cake. The next important thing that we come across in the novel is the dining culture. So whenever not only in Turkish culture, but all around the world, all around in different parts of the countries, you find that whenever we have guests visiting our house, we usually prepare a special recipe for our guest. And by this way, what are we doing? We are actually honoring the guest. And we find that many of the activities, many of the important decisions, discussions, and storytelling narration also happens around the dining table. And when Armanosh, the daughter of Rose, visits the Turkish family, especially the Kazansi family, she notices one thing, that the dining table is always being set by none other than Banu herself. And the timing of the breakfast was laid early from morning 6 o'clock, and breakfast will be there till 9:30 a.m. so that whenever people, according to their own convenience, they can come and they can have their food depending upon their mood. And even when Zaliha's brother Mustafa, who had raped her, when he returns back, he actually dies. And in the entire Turkish culture, there are certain rites which they follow. So, for example, when there is mourning going on, in that particular house, nobody would cook. The guests who visit the house of mourning would bring food, and there was no salt in the house, there was no meat, and there was no liquor as well. So you find that Food also serves as a way to build relationship among people. Um, Food brings not only people from different culture, people from different countries. It also builds relationship. For example, the relationship between Isa and Armanosh also gets built up. So you find that, so the best way to know a country's culture is through food. And here ends my presentation. Yes,
Thanks
ma'am.
for, yes, thank you for Ms. Abhishek. What the entire presentation has been, the choice of the work itself is a gastronomic. When we are supposed to have food in India, yes, it's at this time you give a food feeding to it, and the gastronomic appeal is even so close to it, and then the novel itself has the chapters arranged in such way that it is all about the food. Food the chapter, like you rightly pointed out, it has the raisins there, it has all this direct and explicit relation to food as a metaphor that is being used there to have brought in the significance in many ways. For me, when I go through your presentation, and in general, my observation is no taste is universal. No taste is universal according to what I perceive to be. And in such a case, and how are gastronomical interest and taste? How do you, you know, define gastronomical interest and taste? Especially talking about supermarket in your select text and read into it. How do you look at the gastronomical appeal and interest and taste? How do you look at it as someone who's worked on this particular text?
Of course, the book does appeal to our senses, and it leads to more carving of food, especially when I looked at the picture of Azure, I was really tempted, and I was reminded of our regional cuisine of payasam. I think that food is not only basically important just for survival. Food is something, even the moment when we think of any food, naturally, the first thing that it appeals is to our senses as well. So even food is also related to health, again, for the well-being of ourselves, which again is important. So in this way, I think this is particularly very, very important now.
Ma'am, if I may get back to the question that I asked just a minute before.
Ma'am,
So,
actually, your voice is breaking. I'm not able to hear you properly.
am I clear now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, yes, yes.
So may I repeat my question again?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
So when it comes to gastronomical appeal to any food, for that matter, they are all rooted in the local. Do you believe
Yeah.
that? And they also somewhere it is taste specific. Say my taste is not yours. That kind of a individual affiliation to taste comes into the picture. So how do
Yes.
you look at the individual and the universal together read from this particular text? So
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah. Yes, I
the
got
food
it. I got it.
metaphor,
Ma'am.
the food metaphor, that's how it's being used. It's a kind of question that I want to ask you.
Um, okay, ma'am. Taking from the regional point of view, almost regional cuisine. Talking about regional cuisine, we find that regional cuisine, each and every region has its own particular food, and it is very, very special. But when it goes to the universal, when the same food goes to the universal level, we find that people, according to their own tastes, they make their own modification, and they actually make their own alteration according to their own culture. And in this way, I find that food is actually universal, but the most important thing is taste. Taste varies from country to country, and I would still go on to say that regional cuisine, nobody can exactly maintain the same taste of the regional cuisine. Only the local people will retain the regional cuisine, ma'am. That real taste, the real taste and the real taste bud.
So your title says that the food as an expression of identity. Which identity do you affiliate yourself to be? It's a
Yes, ma'am, in a way.
because it's brought in so many questions to my mind. I hope the audience will be happy to these are questions that keep my mind and addressing, articulating. So the audience also might have their own questions. So if any
Yes,
audience have any questions, they can also add to what has pointed out. Thanks for the Mr. Pranav Bhatt. Pranav Bhatt. Mr. Pardana Bhatt.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Pardana Bhatt, will you make a presentation?
Yes, ma'am. I have an oral presentation.
Your own presentation. Okay, you are presenting on
Yeah.
women in Afghanistan, a study of participation.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Shall I start, ma'am?
Yes, yes, please begin.
Hmm. Good afternoon to everyone. Today I'm going to present a paper under title Women in Afghanistan, a study of rights and political participation. In South Asia, Afghanistan is one of the countries with a high gender gap and rigid social norms that prevent women from meaningful involvement in socio-political activities, even though in the post-Taliban period, constitution guarantees equality to all citizens regardless of gender. Equality between men and women has been one of the most critical human rights safeguards since the United Nations was founded. But in Afghanistan, due to its complex religious and cultural barriers, it was extremely difficult for authorities to implement any new laws. A woman is not allowed to develop according to her nature, but is reminded at every stage of life that she is the other who has to come up to the expectation of the other member of society. And being a Muslim dominated country, religion occupies an important place. Religion occupies an important place, and therefore, the mullahs or the clergy have always exercised a major influence on the country's social and political scenario. Historically, it has been seen that women's rights have always been politicalized and central to the political conflict in Afghanistan. In the 1920s, efforts by reformist, nationalists, and modernizers to improve the status of women, to establish an education system, and to modernize the economy and society met with fierce resistance from traditionalists and ulama. These factors were behind the defeat of the modernizing efforts of King Amanullah in the 1920s, the defeat of the Marxist and the attempt to implement a social program in the socialist program in the 1980s, and the disintegration and the defeat of the short-lived Mujahideen government in the 1990s. These factors also explain why the Taliban regime was unable and unwilling to implement a program for social development in a favor of women. Contemporary Afghanistan was situated in what the demographer Cardwell has called the patriarchal belt and is an extreme case what Kandioti termed classical patriarchy. Here, the patriarchal extended family is a central social unit in which the senior members has authority over everyone else, including younger men. In Afghanistan, the Taliban and other armed groups in an undeclared collaborations with the patriarchy and the tribal culture of Afghanistan represent the hegemonic alliance of the three. The ultimate victim being the Afghan women, and women belong to minorities, although men too have affected in a certain way. History shows the interweaving of all these three forces on a more general level, where women are restricted to the primary roles of procreation, home, and the hearth, while males have authority and are accepted to offer security. The relation of the two sexes is not that of the two electric poles, argues Simon de Beauvoir, because men represent both the positive and the neutral. The woman is negative to such a point that any discrimination is imputed to her as a limitation, without reciprocity. Afghanistan, where the allocation of diverse rights and privileges is impacted by economic, social, political, and sexual stratification, resulting in stark differences and disastrous consequences. When we look in depth to the aspects of women in Afghanistan, we find that many factors which lead them to the present situations in Afghanistan, that is, patriarchal structure, Afghan traditional social norms, religious ideological influences, and the geographical factors. After the fall of Taliban regime in 2001, the position of women began to improve with respect to their rights in different spheres. The establishment of an interim administration for Afghanistan, the creation of Ministry of Women Affairs and donor assistance programs for women gave them a chance to retain their role in public life and to play an active part in their country development. And at the same time, there has been an increase in the number of international and national NGOs operating in Afghanistan during post-Taliban period. These NGOs played an important role in the development and reconstruction of Afghan society. According to statistics of Ministry of Economy of Afghanistan, there are 2,150 NGOs which were working during post-Taliban period in Afghanistan. Although NGOs have been engaging in various fields in Afghanistan, gender issues are one of those areas which attracted the attention of most of the international and national NGOs as well as donors. This attention was mainly due to the prolonged deprivations and the widespread violations of women's rights in Afghanistan, especially in the time of Taliban regime from 1996 to 2001. Despite taking substantial strides regarding women promotion, liberation, and rights by the kingdoms and government of Afghanistan, from King Amanullah to the last president of Afghanistan, Ashraf Ghani, still women face myriad challenges, for example, confronting with the traditional patriarchal structures, and most importantly, struggling with the challenges to the rural-urban divide. The Afghanistan of haves constitutes the urban elites with liberal urban values, and the have not consist of rural tribal chiefs with conservative rural values. More specifically, the majority of Afghan across all age group are illiterate. The gap between the rural and urban women is widening, and women still face significant challenges to
Ms.
education.
Parvina, I'm sorry to intervene. If you
Yes, ma'am.
might wind up your points, we convened for a seminar on cultural studies, and if you might directly connect your title to that of women in Afghanistan, so your paper reads and your presentation is also about women in Afghanistan. How is the culture? How is it related to cultural studies? If you could throw more light on it, it would be more relevant for the seminar, I feel, ma'am. So if you could, touch upon these areas, it would be much better and clear.
Actually, ma'am, as per the present situation in Afghanistan, where the Taliban has captured, as we all know, though then the culture and all the things dominate women in a negative way, because the culture and the tribal rules they implemented in Afghanistan, uh, they implemented the all the things to favor their own personal benefits, whether it was the elders or the Taliban. So I'm concluding. In my concluding remarks, in women rights in contemporary context, participation in public and political life, that will highlight the present situation of women in Afghanistan, how things were affecting there, whether it was culture or the patriarchal system. In terms of women participation in politics, there has been a sharp reversal of development. Currently, women do not participate in politics, but before 15 August 2021, 28 of lawmakers were female. The Taliban current political structure was exclusively male dominated, despite their initial promise of an inclusive administration and welcoming remarks in favor of Afghan women. Even though the 2004 constitution amendment include a gender quota, currently a clear plan of commitment in place to encourage women political participation was not clear. In addition, the Taliban has abolished an essential component of country framework of gender equality. The Bonn Agreement served as a foundation for the establishment of Ministry of Women Affairs in 2001. Additionally, the Ministry of Women Affairs have been eliminated throughout all provinces. The fractions of women working for Taliban-founded organization is not clear. During the post-Taliban period, women made up of 29% and 6% of civil servants and were heavily represented in the cabinet. Foreign Minister, Deputy
Ms.
Minister.
Parvana,
Yes, ma'am.
I will be happy if you could wind up and illustrate the connection that there is between the title of the seminar and, if you can establish that connect, that will be more than fine for the presentation. If anybody in the audience is likely to, intervene and help us get the connect between these, women in Afghanistan, political participation and rights, you may also be willingly a participant in this discussion.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am, and quick 2 points, please conclude.
Oh, okay, ma'am. So I'm concluding with the remarks of Bernard Robin remarks. If the international community does not find a way to rebuild Afghanistan, a flood tide of weapons, cash, and contrabands will escape the state boundaries and make the world less secure for all. When cultural barriers and religious restrictions take shape in a community, it does not tolerate anyone, when person belong to so-called community or not. In Afghanistan, Muslim women and women belong to other religious minority were victim of such evil practices. Gender policies have always rolled like a pendulum and hang between moderate and extreme forces. Women trying hard to craft their identity and existence even under such circumstances where their futures are uncertain. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parvana, for the presentation that you made. If the audience have any queries, you can ask. But basically, for me, a seminar on cultural studies would mean to make a connect with the presentation and the paper, which I fail to see any ground. But if that condition could be made, then I'm sure this paper also would be relevant to this presentation. Thank you. We move on to the. Thank you, Ms. Parvana. We move on to the next presentation for the day. Ms. Pavitra Devi. Is Ms. Pavitra Devi there? Dr. Ramya Niranjani. Dr. Ramya Niranjana. Okay. So if Ms. Baswati, are you there? Our first presenter for today. Baswati Bhattacharya.
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Can you please look if
Okay, first let's speak to Ms. Baswati and then we'll move on to Ms. Pooja. Is that all right?
all right.
Yes. Ms. Baswati, there was technical glitches at that point of you presenting and I could not make any queries to your presentation.
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah.
Yes, I said I'll save it for later. And your topic covered on biopolitics, which is more than relevant. Yes, in many ways it is relevant, and you have touched on the theories by Foucault and others. But then, for me, this entire series of writing comes under the cluster of writings of resistance, if you may agree. Yes, how effective there is a whole lot of a power structure that operates, response to power and experiences from power. All these are part of the discussions that happen in all these writings. Anything that has to be writing back to the empire, like say in our post-colonial literature, we have this term called writing back to the empire, is in many ways where resistance has been something that is phenomenally part of writings. But how effective do you think these counter narrative practices operate in general? If you are working in this area, then you might throw more light on how effective is this articulation against the power effective, especially in this case when we have to talk about a tribal memoir. Especially it is an indigenous voicing, right? It is from the native studies. It comes close to the resistance studies. It also interlinks itself with that of indigenous studies, native studies. So how are these effective in your in your perception? I want to know.
So, ma'am, what I think actually is like that. My basic premise was how biopolitical oppression marginalize these people, these indigenous people in America, not only in America, in several portions of the world. Now, by taking up this theory of counter narrative, which I think I did not elaborate in my presentation, my presentation really lacked that thing, and definitely I think so. But what my basic premise is like that, by writing back, by talking back, when Miranda is saying that these indigenous skeletons, they are appearing in front of the so-called accepted American society, and they are talking back, they are presenting the actual reality, what happened to them. This is kind of reverting back to the original master narrative, to the institutionalized master narratives which have long been there in America, which kids have been learning for several times. So when these people who actually faced what happened at that time, when they are writing their own stories, when they are narrativizing their own stories, this is a kind of counter narrative which actually does not, it's not an opposite of what the master narrative is, but it's actually looking back at those things, those histories, from a different perspective, from a different point of view, so that we can have two vantage points of the same history, and we can understand which was real actually. So that is what I tried to convey through my presentation.
Yes, you articulated so well. But for me, I would also, give you a small hint of a warning, especially in the present time when we make use of the word called real. We should be very, very cautious in the making use of the word real, because that play of words itself is something that we should be very, very cautious. So with that word of caution, and much appreciation for you for keeping it precise, sticking on to the time, and apologies for the technical glitches. Do more of reading in this area, and I hope our audiences also should have had a better perspective from this angle.
Thank you.
Yes, the story of community, the story of individual, yes, both are interconnected. In all our presentations so far, there's a community that there is, and there is individual at another end. So both are interconnected. Sometimes it is locally connected, sometimes it is beyond the boundaries connected when it comes to the trans-cultural exchanges. So for the next presentation, we move on to our next presenter. Thank you, Ms. Baswati. For the next presenter, we have, yes, thank you. For the next presenter, we have with us Ms. Pooja. Ms. Pooja, are you around?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
Ms. Pooja will be
thank you so
presenting on
much.
masculinity. Yes, over to Ms. Pooja.
So my presentation is again oral. I've not made a PPT. So I'm moving directly, and thank you so much for having me here. So I'm here to present a paper that titled Masculinity and the Role in Cinema, an analysis of gender in select Malayalam movies. I've taken 4 movies initially, but I had to change. I had to skip 2 of them because of the time constraints and all, because I have only 10 to 12 minutes of presentation. So I'll be focusing only on 2 movies, and the movies I've taken is Oru Tekkan Tallu Kesa and Tallumala, which are purely Malayalam movies. And to begin with, as an introduction, uh, we know that gender identities are constructed socially. As Pierre Bourdieu says, the whole social world is sexed, and we classify and categorize everything on the basis of arbitrary divisions. And according to him, divisions between sex is a social construction, as natural, as self-evident, and as such contains a full recognition of legitimacy. So masculinity has got sorry masculinity has got a number of definitions, and one of the suitable definition would be that it is a set of social practices and cultural representations associated with being a man. So while considering gender hierarchy, masculinities usually occupy a higher position while considering while comparing to other gender identities. Another definition that states masculinity as socially produced but embodied ways of being male. And these include manners of speech, behavior, gestures, social interaction, division of labor, time, space, etc. So again, to quote Pierre Bourdieu, he points out that in his masculine domination, he points out um, a place of assembly or market or any public space is considered to be reserved for men, whereas the private spaces constituting house is reserved for women. So anyway, we have to take into account the fact that gender identities are related to each other. In order to study feminine or masculine or transgender identity concerns, we have to look into the power relationships between them, within the contemporary gender landscape. So, dominant or hegemonic masculinity, which is the culturally dominant ideal form of masculinity, centered around authority, physical toughness, strength, heterosexuality, and so on. So, it stands in relationship not just to femininity, but also to those ways of being male that seem to deviate from the ideal. It is in the sense that masculinity possesses both external, that is relating to women, as well as internal, that is relating to other men. So, R.W. Connell, who is an Australian sociologist, actually discusses three types of masculinities, and they are hegemonic masculinity, which is actually the dominant form, that heterosexual, that physically and emotionally strong men, and second one is marginalized masculinity, in which he talks about men who are differently abled, or in a Western point of view, men who are non-whites. And third one is subordinate masculinity, which means to express qualities opposite to hegemonic masculinity, that can be men acting in a feminine way, or certain characteristic features that we apply to homosexual people. So masculinity inhabits different spaces, and the discourse of masculinity as a dominant gender is constructed and maintained in different sites, including popular culture such as media, customary laws and regulations, state and its mechanisms, family, religious norms, and so on. So masculinity is a dominant feature in films that center primarily on male protagonists. Cinema, as we know, cinema have always engaged with cultural, social, and political context of society. In other words, cinema reflects society and has a deep influence on its people. Therefore, filmmakers creates a male figure who meets the expectations of the mass. And while considering the history of Malayalam cinema, it is clear that masculine representation outwrites all other factors. Malayalam film industry begins since 1928, and from then on, it has gone through various phases, presenting and representing different ideological aspects of the society. And one cannot avoid the fact that there is always a haunting of male specter, male superstardom. Especially in the post 1990, the terms like superstar, megastar, people star, and all actually have occupied the space of glamour and spectacle in cinema. And the movies that I am focusing here present male protagonists who are very strong, courageous, heterosexual, and they are extra powerful to manage their home as well as the public. So the first movie, that is Urutekken Tallukesa, which was released in the year 2022, directed by Srijit N. The protagonist of the movie is Ammini Pilla, who's enacted by the actor Biju Menon. And Ammini Pilla is a well-respected lighthouse keeper in a village. So he is strong, brave, and typically hegemonic masculine figure. And so the lighthouse situated in the center of the village gives Aminipila a whole view of the village on top of it, and which symbolically suggests his omnipresence like a god figure. So he is a godly figure to everybody, and most of the scenes in the movie takes place in a public market. The whole story is about the rivalry between Ammanipilla and Podian Pilla, which the character acted by the actor Roshan Matthew. And as the title suggests, the movie deals with violence because of Tekken Tallukesa is like the word Tallu, which means a blow, a slap, or a violence. It again is connected with violence, and you know as the title suggests, movie deals with violence, and this Podian Pilla and his friends attacked Aminipilla, yielding him to take rest for 2 months. So Aminipilla decides to revenge back without filing a police complaint. In a commercial movie, violence is regarded as an inevitable part to show one's masculinity. Violence and fight scenes by male protagonists would you know not diminish their social status, but it reinforced their social status as a dominant masculine figure. In fact, many instances in the movie shows female characters having crush on him, having crush on his so-called manliness. And as mentioned earlier, Pilla's revenge was in such a way that he has made sure the whole society acknowledge him revenging the other guys who've actually attacked on him. All this revenge takes place in public places like market or bazaar, and again in the middle of the whole village, the people watching him fighting and making all those actions. This again shows men's access over public space, and there are scenes in the movie where Podian Pillai is symbolically castrated, because when the movie is all about, while talking about the movie, the characters are actually in competition with each other for their greed for power and pride. So when it's all about how how you create a space of your own through your masculine traits is what these characters are looking at. So there might be scenes like mockeries, and where the other guy is called as you're not a man because you're acting in a certain way, and you have to be like him, you have to be like Aminipila because he is that masculine, he is that super figure. And so these things actually somehow creates symbolic castration in other men. So the power structure works within it is obvious that this power structure works within a particular gender. And as I mentioned earlier, the hegemonic masculinity is regarded as superior or supreme form of gender while comparing to other gender identities. And the second movie which I am focusing on, Tellumala, it is also a 2022 movie, and it's a Malayalam language action film directed by Khalid Rahman. And similar to the previous movie, it also talks about the ego clash between two men, Wazim, who is the protagonist, enacted by Tobino Thomas, and Reggie, who is a police. The whole movie is based on a chain of fight scenes, as the title suggests. And like Rukmini, who is the wife of Aminipilla in the previous movie, in this movie, the girl Fatima Bibi is attracted to Wazim for his physique and for his that strong attitude, and because he does all those fight scenes, and she was attracted to him. And In other words, these movies try to develop a notion of how women love men to be dominant or hegemonic masculine. And Wazim even becomes a social media celebrity due to his constant, in the movie, he becomes a social media celebrity due to his constant fight scenes with many men. And most of the action scenes in the film takes place in towns, markets, festivals, public theaters, and so on. So, though Reggie is a police, the character Reggie is a police, the movie gives the picture of how repressive state apparatus like law, police, confined to the masculine ideology. And movie presents, men, and their ego and greed for pride or power to reinforce their maleness. And there is a scene in the movie where Wazim and his friend looks at the mirror, and his friend tells him that both you and I have, that is the mirror image, you and I have an obligation to protect that guy's pride. That is the guy's Wazim here. And in both the movies, there are close-up shots of male body. They project heterosexual men with strong physique, capable of fighting with any other men. Now, again, to quote Bourdieu, he says that, to quote him, the social world constructs the body as a sexually defined reality and as the depository of sexually defining principles of vision and division. This embodied social program of perception is applied to all the things of the world, and firstly to the body itself. in its biological reality. It is this program which constructs the difference between the biological sexes in the conformity with the principles of mythic vision of the world rooted in the arbitrary relationship of domination. So the socially constructed difference in gender identities becomes the basis and apparently natural justification. So the admiration, respect, and love, and people like Aminapilla and Wazim gives, they are getting from the people, gives a clear picture how symbolic order of the society is deeply embodied in, deeply rooted in masculinity. And to conclude, both the movies, you know, or the movies similar to these kind of movies, action genre films, portrays dominant masculine men and their constant attempt to reinforce their identity. No, and recent films of Malayalam film industry, of course, the post 1990 of Malayalam cinema have actually seen stardom, superstardom, super mega stardom, whatever, to celebrate the masculine figure and all. But recently, again, this industry of South Indian cinema is having a tendency to make films belonging to action genre with hegemonic masculine or hyper masculine male protagonists. And specifically since 2020, 2020 to present. And though such films were made earlier, these films from 2020 onwards is not about, the story is not about a hero and a villain, but rather it's between men who become competitors of pride and power. So that's all about my presentation, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Pooja. There was a little technical glitch in between that I had to go and come back. But it is more than relevant to be covered masculinity at this point of time, especially in Malayalam cinema, which is all
Ma'am, I think I'm not clear. Please, can you please clarify?
now.
Hello?
Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am, yes.
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 So, Pooja, thanks for the presentation on masculinity, the role of cinema and analysis of gender and movies. Yes, you had focused on the Malayalam movie, so very current and recent. But what I'm familiar from my point of view is Malayalam cinema in general has so much of masculinity. Some when it comes to Malayalam movies in general, time and again, masculinity has been projected as the omnipresent norm for any male actor to project. That's been an ever present. Only recently, a dialogue, we have entered into a conversation about masculinity. We started interrogating about masculinity in Malayalam cinema, and many of them have been vocal in the Malayalam cinema industry about it. There is a writing back, there is a performing back to this established norm. There are less, in writing back, there are voices that are against the established norm that are coming up recently, and you have rightly pointed it out. My question is, when we talk about this masculinity as a category, say, then our very own lady superstar Manju Warrior, there's a coinage called lady superstar Manju Warrior in Malayalam movie industry, where Mohanlal seems to be the superstar, and this is a lady superstar. Now, my question is about the essentialism. When we talk about, we cannot but avoid essentialism. When it comes to hegemonic masculinity or marginalized masculinity or subordinate masculinity, is there a way out from all these norms?
Okay. So, ma'am, thanks for your question, but I don't think there is a way out, because as far as I understood, the whole society is again constructed in a patriarchal point of view. So even if we say there are female-centric roles, sometimes in some way or the other they are also confined to this male point of view, definitely. So you cannot come out of it unless and until there is a way out. This whole social structure is actually they have to be taken out from this patriarchal point of view. That's not possible, because the whole norms and codes that we are born into, in the Lacanian terms, we are actually, once we started using the language, and once we are into the symbolic structure of the society, we become the subjects. So it's not possible for you to, even if we say there are female-centric roles, there might be the scenes, and there might be even the character who's confined to this pure patriarchal laws. That's not possible,
It's not
according to
possible.
me. No, according to me.
Yes, yes. This just a thought that came out. Masculinity in spaces are part of our life, and masculinity in the screen is part of our life. But when we kind of interrogate, is there a way out? That's a curious. I was curious to know, because masculinity studies is also gaining popularity in India right now, presently. So that way, is there a way out? So
Maybe we have a way out of this dominant hegemonic kind of masculinity, but masculinity will be always there. Even if it's
that's the thing. That's the point. When we seriously think about it, masculinity is always there, some form or the other. Huh?
Yes.
Yes. So thanks for bringing it out. More than 11. It's also a discussion that's going on. Somewhere current, contemporary, and relevant discussion you have brought in. So thank you, Ms. Pooja, for that interesting presentation. Now, the audience, with that, we close our presentation, and I apologize for the technical glitches that there were. And I open the floor for discussion from the audience. If you may have any questions regarding the presentation of all the presenters, you may come over to ask questions.